Imagine this. She laughs at my prenup, says love doesn't need paperwork. Then, when she hears she's inheriting millions, her first words are about protecting it. Is that love? That's betrayal. You know how people say divorce is just paperwork? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Hey, I'm Matt. My divorce felt like someone ran a bulldozer through my life and then handed me the bill for the fuel. Half my money, half my stuff, half my peace. I went from a guy with a big house and investments lined up to a guy starting from scratch in an apartment that smelled like old carpet. Took me years to rebuild. Years of grinding, putting in 12-hour days, eating microwave dinners, running numbers until my eyes blurred. But I did it. I clawed my way back. I swore, hand to God, I'd never let anyone blindside me like that again. Not ever. Fast forward to Janet. Teacher. Sweet. Patient. Always had these stories about her students that would crack me up. She wasn't flashy. That's what I liked at first. I didn't want flashy. I wanted someone real. And I'll be honest, after all that rebuilding, my life looked good. Nice house, good car, vacations when I wanted them. She moved in with me, and man, she lit up like a kid at Christmas. She came from a tiny one-bedroom where her couch doubled as a bed. Suddenly, she had marble counters, a walk-in closet, a backyard. She'd laugh and say stuff like, I feel like I'm living in a magazine. I let her soak it up. Felt good, seeing her happy. But then you notice things. Like the fridge is always full because I'm the one filling it. The dinner's out me. The utilities me. Not that she never paid for anything, but it was small stuff. Groceries once in a while, or she'd grab wine on the way home. And I told myself, don't nitpick. Don't be that guy. She's not rolling in money. She's a teacher. Let slide. Peace is better than nickel-and-diming everything, right? At least that's what I kept repeating to myself. So when I proposed, I did it the way you'd expect. Fancy dinner, ring box that almost slipped out of my sweaty hand, her crying and saying yes. Picture perfect. But here's where things turned. I told her straight after, we'd need a prenup. No surprises, no drama, just laying it out. Protect what I built, keep things fair. I thought she'd understand. Instead, boom, instant explosion. She went from crying happy tears to glaring like I just spit in her face. You don't trust me? You think I'm here for your money? She said marriage was supposed to be about unconditional love, about trust, about building a future together. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait, is this unconditional love or unconditional access to everything I've got? I tried explaining. Told her, look, I've been burned before. I've lived the nightmare. This is just protection like insurance. You don't expect your house to burn down, but you still buy coverage. She didn't want to hear it. Said signing one meant I was planning for us to fail. She even threw the ring on the table at one point. Can you believe that? A 45-minute argument in the middle of a restaurant where the waiter kept pretending not to hear us. I was that guy, the one everyone stares at while sipping their soup. And here's the kicker. Against every instinct I had, I gave in. I said, fine, forget the prenup. I caved. Why? Because part of me just wanted to move forward. I wanted to stop fighting. I wanted to be the guy who trusted again, not the bitter divorce guy clinging to legal documents. But walking out of that restaurant, hand in hand, ring back on her finger, I felt it. Unease. Like I just left my car unlocked in a bad neighborhood. Small thing, right? But it sits in your chest. You know you've ignored your own rules. You ever get that gut feeling that something's off, but you can't pin it down? That was me. It wasn't just about money. It was the attitude. The way she slipped so quickly into this lifestyle without ever stopping to think what it took to get here. I'd worked like a dog for every square foot of that house, and she acted like it had always been hers. I didn't resent her exactly. I just noticed. And noticing is dangerous because once you start, you can't stop. So yeah, I let her win the prenup fight. But the truth? I never really stopped protecting myself. Separate accounts. Investments only I knew about. Passwords tight as ever. She probably thought that fight ended with her victory. But for me, it just marked the beginning of watching. Watching, remembering, keeping quiet. Because one thing I learned from the first divorce, love might blind you for a while, but money will always open your eyes.
Hey there, Janet here. Moving into Matt's house felt like I'd slipped into another life. I'm not even exaggerating. My old apartment, cramped, loud, the kind of place where the fridge rattled louder than the TV. Now I had a bathroom with 2 sinks, a closet so big I had to buy extra hangers just to make it look like I belonged. He'd laugh at me, watching me twirl around the kitchen island like a kid, but it wasn't just excitement, it was relief. For the first time, I wasn't stretching every dollar. I was finally breathing easy. So when he proposed, I said yes before he even finished asking. That part was easy. But after the shock wore off, my brain jumped straight to the wedding. I'd dreamed about this for years. Not the marriage part. I mean, of course that too, but the day itself. The dress, the music, the food, the whole fairy tale setup. You don't get many moments in life where you're the star of the show, and I wasn't about to let mine be forgettable. That's where things started to get complicated, because I'd open my Pinterest boards, point to venues with chandeliers and sweeping staircases, and Matt would do this thing, this polite, careful pause. Then he'd ask, "Do we really need all that?" Need. Since when is a wedding about need? It's about once in a lifetime. But he'd keep steering me back to practical stuff, smaller guest lists, cheaper menus, off-season dates. It felt like I was planning with an accountant instead of a fiancé. I tried not to let it bother me, but the more I pushed, the more he pushed back. I'd bring up having a live band, and he'd suggest a DJ. I'd show him a designer gown, and he'd say there were plenty of beautiful dresses at half the price. He even pulled up spreadsheets at one point, literally spreadsheets, comparing average wedding costs. I laughed it off, but inside I was annoyed. I mean, why was he acting like money was this fragile thing? He's successful, comfortable. We're not broke 20-somethings scraping together change for a backyard barbecue. I started rationalizing. He had his world, I had mine. I wasn't trying to bleed him dry, I just wanted a wedding that matched the life we were already living. He drove a luxury car, for crying out loud. He'd fly first class without blinking. So why was I suddenly the unreasonable one for wanting a venue that didn't smell like a community center? I'll admit, I leaned into guilt sometimes. Not on purpose, but it slipped out. If he hesitated too long, I'd remind him this was the one day that was really mine. You can afford it, I'd say, half joking, half dead serious. I could see the way his jaw would tighten, but he never snapped back. He'd just say something like, "We'll talk about it," and then move the conversation somewhere else. Here's the thing, though. He didn't exactly shut the door either. He'd go with me to look at venues, even if he made faces at the price tags. He'd listen when I talked about flowers, even if he pointed out how fast they die. He didn't stop me from dreaming, but he didn't sign off either. It was like he was keeping me on a leash, letting me walk ahead but never too far. Did it frustrate me? Of course. I wanted him to be as excited as I was, to dive into planning with both feet. Instead, he acted like he was keeping score. And I couldn't shake the thought, if he really loved me, wouldn't he just want to make me happy? Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be? Shared everything. Shared dreams. Shared money? I told myself not to push too hard. Not yet. We'd only just gotten engaged. The last thing I wanted was to scare him off by acting like a bridezilla. So I played it cool on the outside. I pinned dresses, scrolled catering menus, doodled little flower arrangements in the margins of my planner. Inside, though, I was stewing, because I knew what I wanted, and deep down, I felt like he owed me that much. After all, hadn't I already given up my independence to move into his world? So that's where we were. Me sketching dreams in my head, him running cost-benefit analyses in his. He kept the wallet closed, at least for the big stuff, but I figured it was just nerves. He'd loosen up once he saw how much it mattered to me. Because love isn't about pinching pennies. It's about stepping up, especially when the moment calls for it. And what moment calls louder than the day your fiancé walks down the aisle?
You ever feel like you're watching a movie you've already seen, but you can't remember how it ends? That's how being engaged to Janet started to feel. The excitement was there, sure, but underneath it, I had this déjà vu, the same knots in my stomach I had back in my first marriage, right before everything fell apart. It wasn't screaming red flags, not yet. More like little flickers, things that made me pause. Like the way she talked about our money. Not casually either. One night, she was scrolling through her phone, looking at some influencer's honeymoon in the Maldives, and she said, "We should do something like that. Our money should go toward experiences." Our money. I didn't say anything, but inside I thought, hold on. You're talking about pooling everything like it's a joint piggy bank, and we haven't even nailed down the guest list yet. Or the time we toured a venue. Gorgeous place, don't get me wrong. It had this sweeping staircase, fountains, chandeliers, the kind of place you'd expect royalty to rent. Price tag? Astronomical. I said we should keep looking, and she gave me that look. You know the one. Like you just told a kid they can't have ice cream after dinner. Her voice stayed light, but I heard the edge. You can afford it, Matt. That line was becoming her go-to, and every time she said it, I felt the same punch in my gut. So yeah, I started keeping things closer to the chest. I nod, smile, go along with the early planning, but inside I was running numbers she never saw. Separate accounts, investments she didn't know about, a few side projects I didn't mention. Old habits. Protective habits. I wasn't paranoid, I was just careful. But I also knew I couldn't keep carrying these thoughts around by myself. I needed to say it out loud. That's when I started talking to Tom, Janet's uncle. Older guy, divorced, been through the ringer. He and I clicked early on, maybe because we both had that once bitten, twice shy thing going. One night, after a family barbecue, we ended up on his porch with a couple of beers. Everyone else had gone inside, but I stayed out there because I needed to unload. I told him everything. How Janet had blown up over the prenup. How I gave in, even though every instinct screamed at me not to. How she'd started sliding into this lifestyle without hesitation, like it was hers by default. How the wedding talk already felt like she was testing how much I'd been before I snapped. Tom just nodded. Didn't interrupt, didn't sugarcoat, just let me spill. When I finally stopped, he leaned back in his chair, cracked his knuckles, and said, "Matt, I know exactly where you're standing. And if you don't get clarity now, you're going to end up standing in court later." That hit me like a hammer because he wasn't being dramatic. He'd lived it, lost everything in his divorce. He knew what the stakes were. Then he laid out this idea. Not a lecture, not a demand. Just a suggestion. He said, let's see where her priorities really are. We'll make it simple. His plan? He'd casually announce at a family gathering that he was leaving Janet a $2 million inheritance. Say like it was no big deal, just a matter-of-fact comment over dinner. Nothing flashy. Then we'd watch. Her words, her body language, her reaction. Because the way someone reacts to big money they're about to get, that's who they really are. At first I thought, damn, that's harsh. But the more I sat with it, the more it made sense. How else was I supposed to know? She'd already shown me she didn't like the idea of me protecting what I'd built, but would she turn around and want the same protection for herself if the shoe was on the other foot? It was the perfect test. Not about dollars, not about greed. About consistency. About principle. So I agreed. Quietly. We didn't tell anyone else, obviously. Just me and Tom. And I'll be honest, part of me hoped she'd pass. I wanted her to prove me wrong. To show me that all my doubts were just ghosts from the past. That I was projecting old scars onto someone who didn't deserve it. But deep down, I was bracing myself. The setup was simple. Family dinner. Everyone around the table, talking, laughing, eating too much. Tom waited until the lull, then dropped it like he was talking about the weather. When I go, Janet's set to inherit about $2 million. Just like that. No fanfare. Forks kept clinking, people murmured, conversation kept moving. But my eyes? Locked on her. I didn't care about anyone else in that room. I was watching Janet like a hawk, waiting to see the truth come out.
I'll never forget the way it happened. We were at one of those family dinners where the food keeps coming, and the table's too small for all the plates. I was laughing about something one of my students had done when Uncle Tom, out of nowhere, said it. When I go, Janet's set to inherit about $2 million. Just like that. No build-up, no big speech. He might as well have been announcing the weather. My brain froze for a second, then lit up like fireworks. $2 million. Do you know what that kind of money means when you're used to budgeting every paycheck, when your idea of luxury is ordering delivery instead of cooking? It felt like my whole body exhaled at once. I didn't scream or jump out of my chair. I'm not stupid. But inside, I was already mapping it out. Protect it. Keep it safe. Don't let it get swallowed up. The words slipped out before I thought too hard. How it should be kept separate, how it should be protected. My voice sounded calm, but in my head, I was thinking, finally, I'd have something that was mine, that no one could touch. Was that selfish? Maybe. But if you'd spent your whole life scraping by, you'd understand. Then I caught Matt's face. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even pretending. He just sat there, staring at me like I just confessed to a crime. My stomach dropped, but instead of backpedaling, I doubled down. I started explaining, rationalizing, saying it only made sense to treat an inheritance differently. It wasn't about not trusting him, it was about security. I was trying to sound reasonable, but even as the words came out, I knew how they sounded. Then he came at me, not yelling, not throwing things, just this cold, steady tone that honestly scared me more than if he'd blown up. He reminded me how I'd shredded him for asking for a prenup, how I'd said love meant not putting up walls. And now here I was, practically building a fortress around money I didn't even have yet. He called it hypocrisy, said it exposed my real priorities. I tried to spin it, told him it was different, that a prenup was planning for failure, but an inheritance was protecting a gift. I even tried saying he was twisting my words, making me out to be someone I wasn't. Gaslighting. Maybe. But I was desperate, because I could see it in his eyes. He'd made up his mind. And then Uncle Tom dropped the bomb. Calm as ever, like he was just clarifying a detail. There's no inheritance, he said. That was a test. My ears rang. I couldn't believe it. A test? Who does that? My face burned. Everyone had seen me. Everyone had heard me. And worst of all, Matt had gotten exactly what he was looking for. Proof. I wanted to scream at Tom, tell him it was cruel, unfair. But what good would it have done? The damage was done. Matt's silence was louder than any shouting could have been. He just looked at me like he didn't even recognize who I was anymore. Then he asked for the ring back. No hesitation, no second chances. Just give me the ring. I tried to argue, beg him to think about everything we'd built. Reminded him I'd moved my whole life into his house. That we were planning a future. That one stupid moment shouldn't erase everything. But he wasn't budging. He said he wouldn't be taken for granted. That he'd ignored the red flags once before, and he wasn't doing it again. And just like that, it was over. I packed my things in silence. The same boxes I'd carried in with so much excitement, now filled with clothes and mugs and that stupid plant I'd brought from my apartment. Walking out of that house felt like falling off a cliff. 1 minute I had it all, the house, the future, the security I'd been craving. The next, I was back where I started. Smaller apartment, smaller life, smaller everything. People say love should be enough. But is it? Can love pay the rent? Can love wipe out student loans? Can love give you the kind of wedding you've been dreaming about since you were a kid? I thought love plus security was the real dream. I thought I could have both. But in one night, it all slipped through my fingers. Now I'm left with a question I can't shake. Was I wrong? Or was I just honest about wanting more than fairy tales and sweet words? Because wanting more cost me everything. And now I'm right back where I started. Only this time, with nothing to show for it but a story people will whisper about behind my back.